It's been an interesting couple of weeks as we've seen Microsoft and Apple, the two $2 trillion companies, both drop versions of their next and best operating systems. For Microsoft, Windows 11 is their be-all and end-all. One system for everything. For Apple, it's like a million systems. iPad OS, iOS, Mac OS, Watch OS, I mean, whatever. I thought it would be fun to take a look at two devices that I like to play around with and really do very similar things but very different things. And now they've got very different software to help you do those things. So let's take a look at the iPad Pro 12.9 inch and compare it to the Microsoft Surface Pro X 13 inch. Let's dig in and see how they compare. So I think first of all, look, if you're in the market for a big screen tablet, you've really only got a few choices. Samsung makes a 12-inch Galaxy Tab. I think they call it the S7 Plus right now is the latest one. It's a 16:9 widescreen, which I don't like in general, and I definitely don't like it on a smaller size screen. Great for media consumption, that kind of stuff. It's a little less flexible and usable when you want to get work done. You need an extra height. And also it's running Android, and we know that Android apps aren't the best for tablets, and there aren't really too many of the choices. So we're not going to compare that one here today, but these two both market themselves as being devices that can replace everything else, be your only device, and help you get done what you need to get done. As we like to remind you, this is an entrepreneurial focused channel, so we're thinking about this from a business perspective, and for a lot of you, that's going to mean one of two things. It's going to mean Microsoft Office or Google Workspace, because there's only really the two major suites that everybody uses. So I think let's start off with the obvious elephant in the room. If you are a Microsoft user using Microsoft Office 365, right out of the gate, using a Windows operating system has some advantages. The apps work a little smoother, they do. They're still great on the iPad and you can definitely do everything you want to do, but a lot of it's native and built into the Windows 11 operating system. So I think before we even look at any of the details, that starts to move the needle a little bit to the Windows device. If you're using Google Workspace, well, then you can look at both devices. And one of the things that I've done as I've been using the Windows machine as a daily driver, and I've been working off this plugged into a 4K 32-inch monitor. It drives it great and it works great. Because the Microsoft Edge browser is built on a Chromium engine, you can actually do most things you would do in Google Chrome without any problems. So I've had no issues running my Google Workspace. I've had no issues opening my Gmail, going into Google Drive. Everything basically looks and feels pretty much like I'm using Chrome, but I'm not. I'm using Edge. Now, I could install Chrome on here and it would run it as an emulator. I didn't want to do that because I wanted to experience the Surface Pro X, which is an ARM-based processor, just like Apple, which is not an Intel chip, it's an ARM chip. And there's some limitations there. It can't run all your software. You're not going to run, Photoshop and Lightroom on here and have it flying. It's going to be different because it's emulating the old architecture to make that work. But I wanted to keep it native and clean so that I could see how it compared. It's fast. It's really fast. And they did a great job by building this browser on Chrome. One of the other things that I really like about the Edge browser is you can go over here and you can create what they call apps, and you can install a site as an app. Now, this is basically a progressive web app. So any website out there, if you don't want to install an app or they don't have an app, you can basically kind of fool it and it makes a self-contained window and it runs like an app. So let's try it out and let me show you what I mean. Let's head over to Airbnb. Let's pretend we want to go on vacation and we want to go get ourselves a room. So right now this is in my regular browser window, but I'm going to go to apps and I'm going to install this site as an app and I'm going to call it Airbnb. Now that I've done that, look what happened. So I lost the browser bar, I lost my favorites. This is now basically running like a self-contained app on device. So if I go to the start menu, and here are my pinned apps. So at the moment the system's just defaulting this because it's doing what it wants to do, but I can go look at all. There's Airbnb. It literally looks like a regular program or an application. And when I click on it, obviously, it takes me straight back to here. And now I've got some different options in the menu. I can minimize, I can obviously close one instance down because I opened two, and I can bring it back. It's interesting because it's kind of a workaround. Apple obviously has all the apps, but what I think is the future, and I think Microsoft and Google agree, progressive web apps is the way to go. Because for a developer, they're not having to create more code. They're just creating the web-based app to do what they want it to do. And now we can just tell it, hey, I use this one a lot, put it on my start menu, basically, and it runs. And it's really cool. So I've got my Gmail windows set up. I have multiple Gmail accounts, and I have them set up as progressive web apps or apps on the start menu, and I can click and it takes me straight to it. So I guess what I'm saying in day-to-day life, don't be discounting something like Windows 11 and a Surface Pro X just because you think, oh, the iPad's a better tablet, it's got all the apps, Windows doesn't have the apps. This is one of the ways they're addressing the app gap. The second thing that Microsoft is doing is in the Windows Store, they are actually going ahead and they did a deal with Amazon, and the Amazon App Store will appear in the Windows 11 Store, which means you will be able to install all the Android apps in the Amazon Store. I think they were throwing down the gauntlet to Google. If you don't want to play nice with us, we'll find someone else that will. And I think it was a smart move. And I think what we're going to see is we're going to see potentially the Samsung Galaxy Store appear also on Windows 11. And between the Amazon Store and the Galaxy Store, you're going to get the majority of the apps that you want. And I think Google's going to have no choice but to play nice at some point so they don't get left behind. The reality is Google Chrome as a system, the Chromebooks, Chrome OS, it's not a viable option for a lot of people. You're going to choose between Windows and Apple. And so they're going to need their software to be on device. So when we move over to the iPad Pro, we all should be pretty familiar with iPad OS by this point. There's not a lot of changes in iPad OS 15. You've probably seen the things online already. Obviously, this isn't a deep dive into each individual system. You've got these cool things like the swipe up for the notes. It's nice, it's quick. You can swipe away and they're gone. It stays there so I can kind of swipe back in and I can swipe it away. The widgets is a big change, and you can see I've set my screen up here a little bit differently. So now I've got a great big calendar. So I always see what I got going on. I got some reminders in my inboxes. Definitely from a productivity perspective, really, really cool. I like it a lot. Windows 11 has something similar. You can edit these widgets. Again, the system right now is just defaulting to a news feed and what it thinks I want to see, but you can play around with these things. I gotta tell you, I wish that I could literally have some on-screen permanent widgets here on the dashboard. As an entrepreneur, somebody who uses his device to work all day, every day, I just want to see stuff. I don't want to have to go look for it, especially calendar events. I don't want to miss the things I'm supposed to be at. And I'm sure you probably don't too if you're like me. And so I think this is a really great addition. And then I set up a second screen as kind of the fun screen. Got my Apple TV app, got all my Netflix and Prime Video and everything. Got my music on here as well. And so I can go straight into certain things from it. And then I set up a final one with some, personal kind of stuff. And away you go. And then you got the app drawer, just like on iPhone. Not a lot of changes. Honestly, I think they probably could have dropped this last year. It's a bit lame that they put the widgets out on the iPhone and didn't also bring it to the iPad. The 12.9-inch iPad has a lot of power, especially the new M1 processor. And a lot of people are complaining. I think they're right. I think at the price points, $1099 starting price compared to a Surface Pro X, it starts a little less and the keyboard is a whole lot less. But let's talk about some hardware for a second and we'll switch gears. The first thing is the feel in the hand. I do like the balance of the iPad. I don't like the size of it. It feels a little bit large, a little bit unwieldy when you're holding it in your hand, but when you're using it as a work device, it feels, if anything, a little too small. So they probably got the balance right. I was never a fan of the flat square edges, but compared to the Surface Pro, it's interesting because the Surface Pro X, you see these really thin bezels down the sides, which look gorgeous, but you've got slightly fatter bezels top and bottom. When you're holding it portrait, it's still a little tall and skinny. The iPad, I think, has the better ratio. Surface Pro X is a 3.2. iPad, it looks like it's a little bit wider than that still. And so I do prefer the extra width on the iPad when I'm holding it in portrait mode. Again, personal preference. I've used Surface Pro X as a tablet, literally sat on the couch, goofed around with it, and it's surprisingly great. One of the big differences between the two, and you see this in everything we're looking at, You see it in things like the start menu versus the iOS screen. The icons are smaller, everything's tighter, everything's more precise. On the iPad, everything feels more spread out. The icons are bigger, the words feel a little bit bigger. And really, it's down to this fundamental difference. Surface Pro X is a mouse trackpad first, touch second device, in my opinion. iPad is a touch first and keyboard trackpad second. And I think if you approach your needs with that in mind, that's going to help you pick the right device. Because if you want a quick tip from Mikey as to which way you should go, the best way I can sum this up is if you're using a device for 51% of the time or more to use a keyboard and a mouse, productivity type tasks where you need that precision, you need a good feel, the Surface Pro X I think is the way to go. I really do. If you're using a mainly touch first kind of a system, or you want to use a touch first kind of system, and the productivity, keyboard, mouse, the precision side of things is slightly less important, I think the iPad is probably the better way to go. It feels the more playful, fun device. It feels like a tablet. It feels like a consumption device. It feels like an entertainment device. And although you can do that on Surface Pro X, it doesn't feel as natively built for that. And vice versa. You start talking about productivity, documents, spreadsheets, I got Basecamp on here, project management, and I've got it on both. Everything feels better when I'm using the keyboard and the trackpad on the Surface Pro X compared to iPad. But let's talk about the keyboards and let's talk about the trackpads, because I got a few thoughts about that. Looking at the Surface Pro X keyboard, it's the same keyboard that we either love or hate that they have had on Surface Pros for the last few years. It's a one piece, it's solid. I got the black one here. Look, the keys are beautiful. The keyboard has a really nice feel to it. It feels firm. It's still got a little bit of the bounce, but it feels great. I do wish they made the trackpad bigger. Big old gap at the bottom, big old gap at the top. I don't understand why they didn't stretch this out and make it larger. But the keyboard is very, very, very good. I've got my sound controls, all my usual things here. So I can very quickly turn brightness up and down. I can very quickly turn sound up and down. It feels like I'm in Windows. I go to the Apple keyboard. This is where it gets a little strange for me. The keys, I think, feel cheap. They've got a bit of a rattle. They've got a little bit of movement, but they feel really plasticky. They're slightly larger than the keys on the Surface Pro X. They are backlit, which is a nice touch. I just hate them. I'm sorry, but I do. This is a $300+ keyboard. I don't know where that price comes from. I don't know what they're thinking, but I don't think it's even worth the $199 that you can find the previous gen keyboard on sale for. The trackpad is even smaller than the Surface Pro X, which is already too small. Now, I know you're going to say, well, Mike, it's a touchscreen. Yeah, but if you're going to give me a trackpad, give me one that's usable. And the reason is because they've had to make this concession and balance the iPad so it's not so top heavy, because there's no stand, whereas the Surface Pro X has the stand on the back. Now look, this thing is awesome. I can slide it down and I can bring it back up to anywhere I want with this kind of friction-based stand. It's genius. It works perfectly, and it's a great example of where Apple have completely missed the boat because they don't want to affect their feel, their cosmetic, their whatever. They wanted a clean, flat slab of aluminum on the back and didn't want to put a kickstand out there. But sometimes function should rise over form. We use these to work on, and we need to be able to work on them, and it's not helpful. Even last night, using the Surface Pro X on my lap with the keyboard off, I was using the kickstand to hold it and balance it. On iPad, I've got to go buy another case. I literally have two cases. I have a case with the fold around that I use kind of around the house because the keyboard case is so thick, so chunky, it makes it bigger than a MacBook Pro. And then I have to have the keyboard case as well. So I'm spending more money. Now I've got to flip these things around and change them. And I don't think that's a great experience for a user. It's a hassle, and when I'm traveling, I don't want to carry all this gear. I think the keyboard is a complete letdown. The only thing I like about it is the fact that I can literally just pull it off and it's magnetized and it falls into place. The other challenge I have with this is there's a very limited range of motion, and sometimes I need to get it back further and I can't because it just won't let me. The angles might work for some, but if you're taller like me, you're going to need a little bit more of a tilt. I think you're going to struggle to get it because I struggle to get it. And I can't always move the tables. Some of my desks I work on are height adjustable and some of them aren't. So all that said, productivity, you want to get some work done, I would not go ahead and be spending money on the iPad based on the hardware, keyboard, trackpad that is available. The Surface Pro X is hands down better. From a goofing around consumption device, I want to touch, I want to feel. Yes, the iPad definitely is a little bit more polished. iPad OS 15 feels super slick. I mean, everything about it is just beautiful. The curves, you know, the smoothness of the switch between, I mean, they've nailed it. They really have. But, and I say but, Microsoft have done a great job too. This is pretty. The way that the icons are laid out now, you know, things like this kind of glassed effect over the desktop background, the start menu, this is a pretty system. Obviously, I'm running dark mode here, which you can see, but the touch works fine. I mean, everything's a little small. I got to think a little bit more about what I'm pressing before I press it, just to make sure that I'm not going to touch the wrong thing. But it absolutely works touch first. And one of the things I really like is if I go into settings, the new settings menu is very logical, it's very clean. I can go check different things out and everything's there. I like this more. It's kind of, we're still at that place where iPad feels not like a kiddie device, I don't want to say that, but it definitely feels like that simpler, blown up phone, whereas Surface Pro X feels like we took a really serious professional productivity device and we slicked it up and smoothed it out to make it better at touch. And ultimately, that's what you've got between these two things. I'm hugely impressed with Windows 11. I'm hugely impressed with how it's working, how smooth it is. And bear in mind, this is like a developer preview. So we're not even at public preview stage here compared to the public preview of the Apple iPad OS 15. Let's talk about battery life. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hey Mike, Windows is terrible for battery life. Apple's awesome. Well, you might be surprised. The ARM-based processor in Surface Pro X has blown me away with battery life. Now remember, I'm only using Windows apps. I've got a couple of things installed on there, like Basecamp, but I installed them as a web app, so it's still Edge that's running it. I haven't installed any non-native apps running in emulation. The battery life has blown me away. I could be wrong, but I think if I charge both of these things up and used them all day and left them running together side by side, I've got a sneaky feeling the Surface Pro X would outlast my iPad Pro. I haven't managed to do it yet. I'm going to goof around some more, but I wanted to get this video out sooner rather than later because I know a lot of people are trying to figure out what's going on with these new systems. The battery life on my iPad, it burns surprisingly quickly. I mean, I'm getting the 9-10 hours. When I'm playing around on my Surface, for example, I'm at 39% here. I haven't charged this thing since I put Windows 11 on it a few days ago. At all. It hasn't been plugged in. I know that's not really scientific. Anecdotally, as a business guy who's been using these and trying to figure out which one he likes the most, I'm hugely impressed with the battery on Windows 11 and Surface Pro X. I don't know whether Windows 11 itself is what's making the battery so much better. The Surface Pro is pretty good anyway with this ARM chip. So look, the future is ARM, right? Until Intel figure this out, battery matters. I don't want to think about chargers when I go to work all day. I want to plug it in overnight. I want to unplug it, get all my stuff done and just that's it. Move on. My goal here was just to hopefully give you a few insights and thoughts on what I've noticed as I've been playing around in this early look at Windows 11, iPad OS 15 on the two devices. If you were going to push me into a corner and say, Mike, okay, tell me which one would you buy? It's a hard choice. It really is. I have to really think about, is it more important for me to get work done? Or is it more important for me to have a slightly more polished, slicker, smoother interface from a touch perspective, especially when it comes to the evenings when I'm maybe want to watch something or I'm just browsing around and, you know, really not doing a whole lot of anything meaningful. If I really had to choose today, from a price perspective, from an overall, what you get for the device and what it can do for you, I think I would go Surface Pro X with Windows 11. I have been blown away with how nice it is. I don't think I'm going to let this device go. And with the iPad, I would be concerned there are still sites that I go to for business and the Safari browser does not play nicely with them. I can't do the things I need to do in them. I have to go reach for my MacBook or another device. I don't have those problems with Surface Pro X. The battery life is killer. It connects to the Microsoft Store. I can watch all my movies. I can download whatever I need to. I think they've got a great device and I think they're going to improve it this year. So I can't wait to see it. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you decide to go with one of these. And until next time, let's go out there and be amazing.